Hello and welcome to Political Update. I'm your host, Christopher Devine, and today we have with us independent candidate for United States Senate, Bruce Skarin. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Christopher.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, to start off, I just want to say how great I think it is that you're doing this show, you and the other students here at the school, because there's a lot at stake for younger generations in what's happening in Congress right now. And by way of introduction, I like to say that I'm running for three main reasons. The first is, as a father, when I look towards the future, I see a world of increasing problems and decreasing opportunity for my kids instead of the other way around. And as a scientist, I know that we actually have everything that we need right now to be creating sustainable solutions that have huge benefits for all of us. And finally, I'm running as an independent because I believe the system we have right now is broken for a variety of reasons. The first of which is what I like to refer to as the system of corruption that comes from money in politics, which has created this dependence between our representatives and a tiny group of funders, which I think is part of the reason for a lot of the dysfunction in Congress and why a record number of voters here in Massachusetts, over 53%, are now registered as independents because they can no longer identify with politics. So those are the reasons why I'm running and why I'm hoping to be able to represent this new majority that we have here in Massachusetts that really hasn't any kind of effective representation in Congress right now.
So what is your campaign going to do differently than those, than the majority, the Democrats and the Republicans?
Sure.
What are you going to do differently as an independent?
Right. So as I said, that first issue, I think, is what's created a lot of the problems that we're having right now. So to address that, I've capped contributions to just $15 a person. And I'm doing that because I believe that $2,600, which is the federal maximum, is not affordable. And if we're going to have representation, it needs to be affordable. And we need to have these citizen-funded campaigns where we can kind of turn the system on its head and collect tiny amounts of money from a large number of people instead of the other way around, which is what we have right now. And I think once we take care of that first issue, then we can have real meaningful discussions about how we're going to take on all the other problems and all the other issues that concern people. And for that, I think, once we remove that in a process that I've started through my campaign site so far, I'm going to be asking people for their priorities so that I spend my time and attention focusing on the issues that concern people, whether it's education or healthcare, the environment, or national debt, or things like that. So those are just a few of the things that I'm looking to do differently.
Okay, so have you always been an independent, or were you once a member of one of the two major
Sure.
political parties?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in a family of Democrats and voted that way. So I have kind of a liberal background. But as I've gotten older, I've become increasingly concerned with our ability to be conservative, not just about the environment and social and progressive on social issues, but also conservative about what we're doing with our money and the kind of future that we're creating with our government. And so even in the last few elections, I've been voting for Republican candidates because I find that they tend to be a little bit more independent, at least here in Massachusetts, but really not independent enough.
Okay, so tell us why the U.S. Senate, as a first-time candidate like yourself,
Sure.
Most people would start at a more state or local level. So
Right.
What attracted you to the United States Senate?
So there's a variety of reasons there. I believe, first of all, that my skills and experience are really best suited for taking on some of the big problems. So my background as a scientist is in simulation models, which I use to help understand really big problems that basically can't be solved without the help of computers. But I'm also running because I believe that we need this kind of fresh perspective sooner rather than later. So instead of locking in someone who's been in Congress for over 30 years, again, for another 6 years, we really need some fresh ideas now. And so that's why I'm willing to run for the United States Senate and bring these kinds of different ideas in without having gone through the system and worked up through the system that essentially is not working, that I believe is broken right now. So that I can come in with that fresh perspective and offer some really different ideas.
Okay, so you, this is a quote from you. You call our political system corrupt. You say Senator Markey is not corrupt, he is merely trapped within a corrupt system. So why don't you explain to us what you're thinking when you say that?
Right, yeah. So I want to be really clear that, I don't think Senator Markey is a bad person. He's given our country lots of great service and our Commonwealth over the years. But many of the changes that have taken place since Citizen United have created, as I mentioned earlier, that first issue of this money in politics, which changed the whole dynamic in how campaigns and elections were run, and it's put too much focus on money instead of on connecting with people. And I believe that the way that things are set up within parties themselves, within campaign finance, that until we kind of take that step outside, we're not going to be able to get to moving on to dealing with all the other problems because there's too much influence from all these outside groups.
Okay, you also say that your campaign has taken a new approach.
Explain that a little bit more. Yeah, so in addition to capping contributions at that level, I'm going to be taking a 1,000-mile walking tour of Massachusetts to basically go from town to town, meeting with voters, collecting signatures to get on the ballot, explaining my approach to politics, but most importantly, listening to people, because I think right now there's a huge disconnect between voters and Congress. This is, again, some part of the problems with that system is that they live in a world where they don't have to deal with the same kinds of problems, and that they're more concerned with this group from a tiny, the issues for this tiny group of funders. And, the more people that I talk to tell me exactly the same thing, that, that the leaders don't get it, they don't understand what the challenges are, and that their priorities aren't being represented. So I'm doing that. I'm starting this conversation both on the road and online, and I'm already collecting feedback from supporters that's telling me that indeed corruption is their number one issue. It's twice as important as any other issue, which no candidate is effectively dealing with. And then after that, at the top of the list, there are things like having top-notch education that is accessible to people both early and late in life. People want to see an economy that is not distorted by the crony capitalism that we have now, that allows companies to hand off risk to taxpayers or hand off the cost of actions to the rest of us. And they want to see an environment that is not getting pushed to the brink by an energy policy that is dependent on a finite resource that is only getting more expensive to extract and more risky to extract. So those are just some of the things that I'm hearing from people now. And those are just some of the ways that I'm going to use their input to help focus what I spend my time on and how I'm being responsive to what people want.
Okay, so we'll come back to that walking tour that you
Sure.
mentioned.
Yep.
But right now let's cover a certain issue, and I picked this issue because you had recently released an online article about this. That issue is gay rights. It's one of the major issues that the nation is facing right now. Can you explain your stance on that?
Sure. So as I say in that piece, I'm a very strong supporter of civil rights. And I believe that this is really kind of the last civil rights fight. We were wrong in the past on slavery. We were wrong on the rights for women to vote. We were wrong on having equal civil rights for people of all race. And I think right now we're wrong on this final way of sort of classifying people and discriminating against people. And I'm familiar with the religious implications of creating that kind of equality for things like marriage equality. I grew up as a Quaker in a modern family, and at one of the meetings, after 15 years of discussion, they came to pass a resolution that basically recognized that there was a problem with treating people differently when it came to marriage, and that we needed marriage equality. And in order for that minute to pass, there had to be unanimous agreement on that. And it's one thing that's kind of interesting about Quakers is that if any one individual were to stood up and say, they did not support it, it never would have passed. So I know that there are religious implications, but when a group of people can make that decision, if religion is kind of being used as the last differentiator for why discrimination should be legal, then whose religion are we protecting? Is it, somebody else's, or is it my religious beliefs? And so I think when we put it in those terms, it really becomes a clear issue that we cannot continue to make the same mistakes that we've made in the past, and that we need to correct that injustice, and we need to correct it as soon as possible.
Okay, so now we're going to go back to that walking tour
Okay.
that you had mentioned. In a couple of weeks, you're going to be starting that, and that's a tour across Massachusetts.
That's right.
Meeting, connecting with voters. Tell the viewers a little bit about that and what you and your volunteers are going to be doing.
Sure. So we've got the walk all planned out now. It's going to be 80 days. There's going to be stops every single day to meet with voters. It starts on April 6th in my hometown of Millbury, Massachusetts. We're getting a group of folks together for a rally at our local cinema. And after that, we'll be departing on the first 10-mile leg to Oxford. And the intent here really is to do as I mentioned before, collect signatures to get on the ballot, spend some time each day explaining with voters what it is that I'm doing, how this is all going to work, and how it's going to be successful and effective in changing things, and listening to voters and getting their feedback and getting them re-engaged in the process. And so that will go until August 31st, when after that I'll do kind of the more traditional campaigning that you would expect.
Okay, and are you the only candidate, doing a walking tour?
There have been some walking tours in the past. I know there was a gentleman that I walked with when I did a 185-mile walk this last January against that issue of corruption in politics. His name's Rick Hubbard. He was in Vermont. He did a walking campaign there for U.S. Senate. But right now, in this day and age, I'm not aware of any other candidate that's trying to use that approach. We are pretty familiar with candidates doing county-by-county tours and things like that. But I think it's really important to take the time and to show the dedication by walking, because it gives me the kind of free time to talk to people in a setting that's free of distractions. And it gives me an opportunity to see the entire state, not just where the populated areas are, but the entire state and what the issues are and how they're different for each part of our Commonwealth.
Okay, well, we wish you the best of luck and success on that campaign. We thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here today.
Sure.
As always, I'm Christopher Devine, and this has been Political Update.